Hi, and welcome to the Western New York Division of the NMRA's October 2020 meeting. This meeting is the first time we're using freeconferencecalling.com, and so yours truly had a little bit of problems getting the videos started. So we have Doug Sandmeyer from Division 12 is doing a clinic for us on Light It, a device from NCE. And it's important for us to get to this as quickly as we can because Doug's already underway. And so we'll get to the portion that I was able to capture in just a second. But I also want to let you know that Clark Kooning, who's a master model railroader and was the head of modeling with the masters for our national program, he is also going to be doing a clinic for us, and he's going to be doing model railroading 101. And so I really thank both of these clinicians. I apologize to Doug for missing part of his program. And I hope you like our setup and our meeting. We have a brief meeting first and then the two programs. So I hope you enjoy it. And again, sorry to Doug, and thanks for everybody for watching.
In a row. You have the three outputs. It's a common anode. So this is your positive connection to your LEDs. And the outputs are labeled red, yellow, and white and green based on their signaling connections that NCE uses. And there's the program button, the all-important program button, which you'll need for programming it. There's a trim pot, a variable resistor for using if you're going to hook it up with DC. This is your means of controlling the light intensity, because you can't access that with DCC if you're in DC. So let's see. Once you get all your programming done, there's a little solder or a little board trace here with the X, and you can cut this. These have an onboard LED that you can use for programming or lighting, and it's helpful when you test these initially before you start hooking everything up. So you press your programming button, and this onboard LED starts flashing to let you know that you're in programming mode. So once you get everything set up, then you can, and you're sure it's going to work, then you can cut this trace. That turns off this LED, and your outputs are your light sources then. And when you're putting this in buildings or cars or what have you, you want to remember that this gold button is your only means of reprogramming it to start over again if you have to. Although somebody posted on the NCE forum, there is a hack. These two solder pads on this edge of the board can be used with a normally open switch as a remote program mode. So there is that out. And importantly, you want to test your LEDs as you go. Don't wait till you get everything closed up and then find out that one of them doesn't work, or you didn't scrape enough wire off or scrape enough insulation off your lead from the LED to make contact here at this point. So let's talk about programming the address here. There's a textbook method which in a minute here. You start by pressing the. I gotta move something here on the screen a minute. There we go. It won't go away. Okay, so for programming, you'll start by pressing the gold button here, and Then decide what address you want. If you're going to program like a locomotive address, let's say, I think in this case I use 10, the button or the LED will start flashing on board. Then you select the address on the, or you hit enter, pick your address that you want, enter that on the throttle. Then you call up programming on the main. These cannot be programmed with a off the main programming option. You have to program them on the main. So you call up your programming mode on the main, and you tell it you want to program control variable number 1, and you're going to set that to a value of 1. And you have 60 seconds to do that. So you got to. Thought I had a little video here, but I see that's not showing up for some reason. Let's try the next. Oh, there we go. So now you can see this LED is flashing. That's your indicator that you have 60 seconds to get going, and you can walk through the steps here. And you can see if you hit 0 for lights, L1, the first one comes on, and then L2 is the second one, and so on. And you've got it programmed. There is a handy little hack, and we'll go through this. You do all your programming. You get up to the very last step here, and then so you entered the CV number 1, you enter the value that you want. Now you press the gold button, and then all you have to do is hit enter. So if you save some of the aggravation of being in a rush to get everything done in 60 seconds. And then we test it. So, okay, so now once you get your address in there, it's easy to go with JMRI, because now you've got everything on the drop-down menus, and you can go ahead with your programming that. In that mode, you can enter your structure name or wherever you're using this, and manufacturer. I think I've forgotten when. Is it just maybe 2 years ago, or maybe not even that long ago, that JMRI added the light it to the drop-down list for NCE. Down here, you can see this. And here we have the output page on JMRI. You can see over here on you get your 3 functions for the white and green effects, the yellow effect, and the red effect. And this is the default here: F0, F1, and F2. Okay, and if you enter this mode, now you can see you've got a little bit more you can play with, and you can change your function. You can assign any function you want to the output. So if you're working on a building and you find you get the light in the wrong room or something, for where you want it to be, you can just change the function and reroute it that way. And up here we've got the brightness level, and you can set that to anything between 0 and 255. Here's your effects drop down menu. So you got all these different options. And there's an overview of the control variables that you've got, where they're set. One important thing I found is to keep some kind of record of where you're headed with this. I've kind of been following a script in my head, I guess, as to if I'm going to light a building, I'm going to have 3 different categories of buildings. I'll have residences, commercial buildings, and industrial buildings. So in residences, I might assign the 3 different outputs to, say, different times of the day or different areas in the residence. You can have porch lights, say living room lights, bedroom lights, and as you go through and use your functions, you can turn them on and off as you desire for your day-night routine. And then you can do industry the same way. You can have, or commercial, you can have advertising lighting, or internal lighting, or shop lighting, I guess. But it helps to keep a record of that, especially if you start moving around your functions. Here I've got white and green output on function 2, and so on. This one I ended up having to put the light in the largest room just to accommodate it. So I needed to move that output to a different function to accommodate my scheme. And if you're going to use more than one light, you can hook them up in a couple different ways. I've got option 1 is to wire them this way. This would be my DCC bus. These would be connected to the DCC bus with a little micro connector under the layout. And one of the advantages of, or a big advantage of using the lights, rather as opposed to having numerous LEDs wired independently to say a 5-volt bus, is that I can connect a building to the layout with a single 2-conductor wire. So I can remove the building easily without having to disconnect a lot of wiring or worrying about cabling too much. And by doing it this way, I can separate these for programming them. If I want to have this one on address 10 and this one on address 20, if they're wired up with using the through holes and the bus on the light, now I can't separate them easily if I want to have 2 different addresses for some reason. Okay, small LED sources, and if you've been using LEDs for very long, you probably are familiar with a lot of these. We've got I found a fellow named LED Baron on eBay, and these things were pretty reasonably priced. They're about this size. They're excruciatingly small. These came from a guy named the ON30 guy. He's no longer selling these, but there are other sources out there like engineering and CMR products, folks down south of me in Pennsylvania. And of course, you've got Woodland Scenics, and this is one of their lamp posts here. But they also sell their own product, but this is NCE's Illuminator. And there's a note later on. You'll notice the red and black wires are transposed between the 2 receptacles. This is the Woodland Scenics wiring. For some reason, the connector the NCE sends with the Illuminator is wired opposite that. So you need to pay attention to the instructions if you buy the NCE and then use them with your Woodland Scenics equipment. Yeah, there's the note on that. So be advised. Helps to read the instructions in this case. Okay. When you're putting these in buildings, the dealing with the small gauge wire is something you're going to have to keep an eye on. You have some difficulty stripping the coating off the magnet wire, so you can use a couple different methods. You can scrape it off, which is kind of difficult because it's easy to nick the wire and cut it, and the wires keep getting shorter and shorter as you go. Heat works frequently. You can use a soldering iron and then wipe the insulation off. Another problem is getting control with these fine wires. So I've found that using some kind of tacky glue or canopy cement, ACC, anything just to hold them in place. And here you can see the this lamp, the leads come out here, and I've had to tack them down so I could get them over here and solder them to some jumper wires to get where I'm going with the leads. There's a residence that I wired up, and here the leads are short enough that I had to do the final soldering to connect to the board inside the living room here. So it's using a little alligator clip stand to hang onto the board while I'm doing that. That was then cemented or glued in with some receiver tape into the top of the ceiling of the structure. Exposed leads were brought for porch light up through the top of the roof, and they'll be easily covered up with some roofing material. This structure is, before I learned that you can, with some LEDs, connect more than one, especially these micro LEDs, you can put more than one on an output. But at this stage of the game, I hadn't figured that out yet, so I needed two boards with the intent that the boards would be hidden inside the mine structure. That got to be a little problematic because of the fine wires. And here you can see I've used a piece of Plestar tubing as a conduit and brought them all out to this adapter board, and then wired from there to the pair of lights. So these disconnect so they can be passed through a hole in the layout. Here's a small shop, and the only light in it is the light from the illuminator, from the lighted itself. The floor lifts out of this. It just tap it and it picks up and comes out. So you have access to the gold button for programming. There's another structure. This was the structure that was wired before I got started with this, and I ended up using an illuminator here to handle the extra load from the LEDs. These LEDs were a little bit larger, and they were only good 1 to an output. Here's another structure with the light in the top floor. So I've got a couple micro connectors here so I can lift this floor out and add the interior to the building. I don't know what happened here. This micro connector here is actually over here. And there's a caboose wired up with the light. It fits in the toolbox under the cupola seat. On this one, these were purchased marker lights, and they the little LEDs that were in them weren't lined up real well, so I was able to adjust that with the brightness control on the light. So they look the same from the back of the caboose anyway. When would you use DC? Well, I had planned to take the little print shop structure that we showed you just a minute ago to a show, and I wanted to be able to light it. So found out you could switch to, well, actually not switch, I can just hook it up to DC and the lights will work just fine. So made a little DC battery box, and the folks at the show could push a button and light up the structure. Okay, this was kind of a demonstration for how you might use these with your town setting or multiple structures. Method one was to have it programmed as a locomotive. So if you program these as I think this was done where they were all the same address. So all three of these lights were locomotive 10, we'll say. And if you have multiple structures, entering locomotive 10, here's output 0. So you see all the three LEDs come on that were programmed as function 0, and now we've added function 1 and function 2. So got say if this one was residential, this one might be commercial, and this one might be industrial, and you've got different areas being lit up as you progress through the scheme here. There's another scheme. This one is, each one is its own locomotive or address. And you can see I've got different effects going on here. I think this one's the slow flasher. This one's a little bit faster blink. Entering the next address here to get this structure lit. The goal was at some time to program these into something to act as a kind of a drum timer and cycle these independently of the programming panel or the throttle. And scheme 3 was they're all three of these are the same address, but I've expanded in the functions that I use. So it's probably a better scheme for lighting a town, I guess. To have the, no, I guess I didn't start the, yeah. So you enter the address. You want to get the commercial buildings going here, and then maybe the residences down the street start waking up or going to bed or whatever they're doing in the evening. And you can have even more, or it could all, this could all be the same structure if you had three lights in it. So this was NCE's mini panel was what I hope to use for automating this, and I've kind of given up on this, and I've been looking into Arduino to see if I can come up with something using that, and so we'll see where that goes. I was talking to Clark, and Andy about an idea that I had, but I'm not sure how that's going to work. But stay tuned. And of course, you always want to check with the code officer having jurisdiction. Make sure everything's going to be hokey-dokey. And that's it.
That's great. I like the code officer.
I'll give it back
So
to
thanks,
you.
Doug. Thanks very much. Great talk, and I appreciate you taking the time to give it to us this morning. So, if anybody has any questions about this, this is a good time to ask any questions. You can always email me too with a question, and I'll forward along to Doug. So, Doug, one of my questions is, do you have to have NCE to make it work?
No, it should work with any throttle or any means of programming it.
Okay.
It seems that lighting now on layouts are becoming more and more common. More and more people are trying to automate their layouts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I don't know. I guess maybe I was influenced too much from my Lionel days. Sorry, and I was always fascinated by things that either moved or lit or made noises, I guess.
Okay, so go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say I have a list I can email people if they're interested in the sources for these, for any of the devices, I guess, wiring aids.
Why don't you make sure you email it to me, and I'll make sure I post it on our webpage.
Okay, I will do that. And I don't know, I have a feeling I missed a slide somewhere, but and if you can see this, that's the physical size of the light.
Right. It's not real big.
No, not at all.
Got it.
Hey, Doug, I posted in the chat 2 other sources for LEDs. And just something I think people should know, too, is there are micro, nano, and pico. And those are the different sizes, pico being the smallest so far of LED pieces. So if you wanted to put headlights in a HO car, you could certainly use the pico.
Oh yeah, I see folks are even doing ditch lights and under cab lights and stuff using those pico LEDs.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know how they do it. It drove me nuts just trying to light a no-scale structure. The mine structure that I showed had the I guess they're called warehouse lights. They're the kind of lights you see. I guess you see them over pool tables too, but metal shade and that. And I used engineering's I think a stainless steel tubing and bent it into a kind of a shepherd's crook shape and pulled the magnet wires through those things, and that was a real treat. I think you said you'd done, Andy.
Yeah, micro wires are really tough to deal with. That for people who are not familiar with magnet wire is actually thinner than your hair and than a strand of your hair, and it's tough to deal with. Doug, I never stripped it like you tried to with the X-Acto knife. Well, all I did was I touched it to a little bit of solder, and that burns off the insulation, but also tins it at the same time. Yeah. So that makes it a lot easier than trying to, pull off the insulation. So I don't know if that helps anybody.
Yeah, that's what I I've gone with that since I discovered it actually worked on the enameled wire. But the trick is a little blob of solder on there on the iron to, like you say, tin it, but it helps conduct the heat into the insulation as well.
Yeah, right. So, great, Doug. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Now, can you come off of being a presenter there?
Yeah, how do we do that? Just
on the bottom where it says
unshare, I think.
Under share, unshare.
Unshare. How's that?
There we go.
Okay.
So now let's move on to our friend. By the way, Frank just mentioned that great clinic, and he really enjoyed it. So thanks for doing that for us.
Yeah, good job, Doug. Really nice.
Yep, thanks.
Okay, so let's move on to our second clinic, which is my friend Clark Kooning. And Clark is part of the Masters, Modeling with Masters program for the NMRA, and he's been around a long time, and I know a number of us know him from his time here and when he was actually close to us, now that he's in 10 hours away. I don't know if that's because we're friends and he wanted to get away from us or what. But we did find him here, so... Clark, you want to go ahead and do yours? I'm going to mute everybody again, and you're it, buddy.
Okay, I think I'm still not muted, correct?
No, the presenters, the co-hosts, and Doug's still open too. So, no, he's blocked. So good.
All right. Well, I hope everybody can hear me. As Andy said, my name's Clark Kooning, and some of you may know me. I spent a lot of time in the ID and coming down to meetings when they were on Grand Island, New York, or in, I guess, I want to say Newfane, but I don't think they were actually in Newfane. Where the heck were they? Anyway, we had a great time down there, and I certainly went out to Rochester several times to do clinics and see the guys, so we'll go from there. What I said to Andy, what do you want me to talk about? And he kind of said, well, I don't know. And I said, okay. So I'm going to do a little model railroading 101. Some of it is pretty beginnerish. Some there's some good tips and tricks, I think, in there. So we'll just sort of skip along. But if you have a question, just jump in and ask, and we can talk about it. But some stuff I may just skip over fairly quickly. All right, let's see if we can do the share thing. Introduction to okay. That's not it. There. Everybody see that?
We can see it, yeah.
Okay, great. So I hope, as I said, everybody's an NMRA member, and that's great. I've been a member for a long time now. And where I moved to, I lived just outside the Toronto area, and I moved to Elliott Lake, Ontario when I retired. And you can see where the big A is. As Andy said, I'm a 6-hour drive to Toronto, and then to Buffalo would be another, roughly 2 hours. So Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan is just over here, and that's a 2-hour drive for me. So I can go see the Algoma Central, or go ride the Algoma Central. So some of you may know me. I was also past vice president of the whole NMRA. I was the admin vice president. I started Modeling with the Masters way back in 1995 in conjunction with another name you may know, Pete Moffat, who lives in St. Catharines, Ontario. And I developed mine with a master's and have been teaching that ever since 1996 and continue to teach it. I am no longer the manager as of last year. I gave that up to another fellow, Jim Gores, who has taken that over. So I've been the NFR president twice. I was NMRA Canada president. I've been director for on the NMRA board for many years. I've been a national AP judge in contest and been an assistant chairman and all that in the AP and national. When we hosted the Toronto NMRA convention here in 2003, I was the past chairman. And some of you may know me as a host of Train Masters TV. I'm also a regular on Model Rail Radio, which is a fantastic call-in program. It's sort of like a sports call-in program, only strictly for model railroading, so it's a lot of fun. I taught night school for several years. Matter of fact, my outline has been used in Australia and a few other places. I model in a lot of different scales. I have an ON30. I have actually two ON30 show modules. I have an ON3 complete train in ON3 because I belong to a group called the Maple Leaf Mafia, which is Lex Parker and some of those guys down the south. I started off in N-scale, and I have a large N-scale collection, and I still do T-track. I went from N-scale to HON3. I built the San Juan Central when Malcolm Perlow was the big guy at Model Railroader, and then I went to a narrow gauge meet and saw SN3, fell in love with SN3 and sold all my HON3 stuff and built a large SN3 layout, which you'll see a couple pictures of later. And my current wife, I've been married twice, my current wife fell in love with Z-scale or Z-scale, and she had to have some. So now we have about 6 or 7 locomotives in Z-scale and about 40 cars and some track. And if some of you also know me, somebody mentioned Fast Tracks. I'm also involved with Fast Tracks to a certain point. I do almost all the demos for Tim and so forth at shows, and do a lot of work for Fast Tracks at different shows. And in case you didn't hear, the Amherst Model Railroad show in Springfield has been officially canceled. So, introduction to model railroading. So, I think, as I said, this is going to be a quick overview. It can be dry and boring in some topics. And we'll just touch the surface of many of these topics. But like all things, you have to crawl first before you can run. So, there are really 5 general topics in model railroading: track planning, bench work, track laying, wiring, scenery, locos, and rolling stock. That's pretty well the basics of it. So, and since most of you guys live and get sort of maybe some Canadian TV, you know who Red Green is. And he said, I once took engineering, but I didn't take all of it. And man, is that true for model railroading. Because you got to be a little bit of a carpenter to build bench work. You got to be a little bit of a electrician to wire the layout. You got to be a little bit of everything to get a model railroad. Can somebody get that for me? Tell them I'm busy. So track planning. You know, what's your interest in building a model railroad? I think, are you a builder? Is that your interest? Or are you a rail fan? Do you like to watch frames? Or are you interested in switching layout? Is that your thing? Or operation, prototype operation, you know, a customer needs a car to move goods from point A to point B. Is that what your interest is? And I think if you can define all that, you can decide much you can develop a standard, and I'll talk about this quite often in the track planning section here. You have to develop a standard, or else you get way off the scope. And especially when you're new to the hobby, you know, everything is shiny and bright, and you got to have it, and you got to do it, and you want to build, you know, a North American railroad on a 4x8. You want to have the Pacific and the Atlantic, and you want to have a giant steel mill, and you can't do it. You just can't do it. So you have to have a little bit of a standard for the railroad. So first of all, the layout area, it's got to be comfortable. You've got to have good lighting and a backdrop. You know, a lot of people have unfinished basements. That's fine. Just paint the brick, you know, the basement or something, so that you can't cut down dust. But at least you have a little bit of a background. So a lot of people, conventional practice, design a track plan first and then build, and that's great if you have a large space. I, on the other hand, do it the other way. I actually build the bench work first, and then I fit the track plan to those limitations when you're doing smaller layouts. I think that really works out better because a lot of people will say, oh, I can do this, I can do that, and then when you really find out, you can't do it because of the space design. So I think you have to really design a track plan that's dedicated to the space, and then build to the bench work and adapt for the track plan. Best track planning suggestion I give to any skill monitor is develop a set of standards, you know, and stick to them. And the space allotted can dictate your standards, and compromise is the name of the game in this unfortunately. Gauge, everybody kind of knows gauge. Standard gauge is 4 foot 8.5. Anything smaller is narrow gauge. Basically you get an S, so like an S is S scale. The N means narrow gauge, and then the 3 would represent the width of the track, which is 3 foot in this particular thing. If you're really new to the hobby, I suggest building a small project layout and develop some skills. A lot of guys try and build something big, and they don't really understand the relationship of scale and size. And most modelers actually build in their lifetime 5 to 7 layouts. You know, they build the first one, they're not happy with it. They build the second one, they get married, they move, or start to have kids, they got more space. By the time you're getting to my age and retired and so forth, you pretty well know what you want. You know your space limitations usually, and you're building that 6th or 7th layout at that point in time. You know, use of the largest space available. Unless it's your first layout, I suggest you build something smaller. Do not think in 4x8 spaces. Everybody thinks of the sheet of plywood. I think you have to really change that thinking and go to all kinds of different shelf layouts. I think are one of the best modular layouts, but don't think in the 4x8 hunk of plywood. Reach and scenery type all has to be taken into account, in table height. So, and then what you want to do is develop a standard. So you want to pick a scale, your era, your railroad class, motor power freight cars. What do you want to run? What kind of, if you want to run passenger cars, or you want to strictly run freight cars? Everybody knows sort of the relationship in scale size, so I won't spend on top. The era is, of course, the time period of your layout. You know, and your class of railroads, these are kind of Canadian ones, but, you know, well, CN is taking over the world. You guys in the States really don't understand that us Canadians, we're using CN to take over the whole North America. Because they're buying every railroad they can. So Canadian National, you know, that's a big railroad, you know, Union Pacific. Class 2, well, it's now taken up by CN, but BC Rail was a pretty big railroad out in British Columbia. And then the Orangeville and Barrie is just a little railroad. They're sort of like the Genesee and Wyoming type of company, they have some short lines that they run. Motor power, what do you want to run? I think this is very important when you're looking at your track design and stuff. If you're going to go to large steam engines, you got to have bigger facilities. If you're going to run small diesels, for axle diesels, you can get away with a lot tighter equipment. And if you're going to go to same thing with 35, 40-foot cars, no passengers, no problem, you can use kind of 18-inch radiuses. So that all plays into effect. Now, I'm going to give you one of my I think this is one of my greatest tips, and I came up with this myself a number of years ago, and people go, that is one of the great tips, Clark, that you ever come up with. So if a 40-foot car is roughly 6 inches in length, and we're talking an HO here. If you multiply it by 3, the 6 inches by 3 is 18 inches. So the minimum radius that car is going to run on and look reasonable is 18 inches. Now, if you have a modern auto rack, which is 90 feet, and if you measure it, it's roughly 13 inches. If you multiply by that by 3, you're at a 39-inch minimum radius. So when you're looking at cars, ooh, that's a big car. I wonder if that's going to run on my 22-inch radius. Well, if it's an 8-inch car, yeah, no problem. If it's a 12-inch car, ooh, you're going to be pushing it. Same thing with locomotives. And it applies to N scale too. You just have a different length in the car. So grades are an important factor in planning your railroad, and of course the location or type of layout that you're planning. You got to leave room. A lot of people don't leave room for scenery, and that's highly important in buildings. Height of layout for me is very important. I like to have it fairly high. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. The grade should be a reasonable angle that you can run your longest train without adjusting the power. I think that is so that you can set the train out, not worry about it, and then you can go and play in the yard. Okay, so your standards, you want to come up with what's the interest? Are you a builder or are you a rail fan? Write it down. Space, you're going to write down your space. Era, in this particular case, I've said 60 to 70, class 3. And so now that's my standard, all right? And then I'm also going to talk about track, no greater than 2% for the grades. I'm going to use code 83 flex, and no smaller than a number 6 frog angle. Everybody knows about frog angles and turnouts. And radius is 28-inch, and then I'm going to use the parallel track spacing. So I think the most important thing in model railroading is length. Width on a railroad is useless to you except for one thing: when you go to turn a train around. A train, an engine and cars is linear. So you want to have the engine and the caboose out of one town before it gets into the other town. So you have to think about that. I always say that people start off with a published track plan and then add, and you can cut and paste and refer back to your standards. So here's kind of my own personal rules. I use nothing more than 1.8%. Not always possible. Number 6 turnouts is my minimum, using fast tracks usually. Chest height, most of my layouts are at least 52 inches. And I try and always have a reasonable long run, and I really like shelf layouts. And I like the combination of simple operation with a continuous run. I think continuous run for me, is very important. And I think don't be afraid to change your wishes, change your era, change your space. You can change your equipment standards, and even change your scale. There's no reason, at the beginning not to change scales. Now, as we get into it, and you got 50 cars and 400 locomotives, because that's how it usually works. It's a little harder to change scales, but certainly you can at the beginning. benchwork basics. So most of the guys know what tools you need. Safety goggles is always good. And I'll just kind of skip over this: the cookie cutter method, the L girder method, table height, as we talked about. One of the things too is, if you're taller, you can get away with a little higher layout. If you're shorter, you can get a little, you want a little bit lower. A lot of people will say, "Oh, I'm going to build it. My grandson's going to come over, and I build it low." Well, I got news for you. In 5 years or 4 years, he's 6'3", and you're stuck with a layout that's at 3 foot. Don't build for your grandsons. Build it for you, because it's going to change. Track work, I think this is the big difference between a static layout and an operating model. You got to spend some time and do track work properly. Sub-road bed, some guys use homozote still, and the other thing is track and turnouts. Use only nickel silver track, I think, which is pretty well standard now. All-in-one track, some guys still like that, especially the N scale with the Cato track. Sectional track, flex track, and handling track. All right. So things to consider is your rail height, your frag angle, and how you're going to use the. You want a mechanical or manual turnout operation, such as a tortoise or a switch machine, and versus a manual throw. Take your time. Make sure you get smooth joints, all the connections, transition between curves and tangent track. Use an NMRA gauge. Oh my God, ready to run track, flex track is not always engaged. And check and adjust all turnouts, no matter if you've hand laid them or you have bought them. You have to check them because they're not all engaged, trust me. One of the simple things, of course, is to make the mistake of the rail joiner. You get it propped up and you get a big hump. So you want to make sure you get all your rail when you're doing flex track and that. You want to make nice cuts and everything. So remember, there isn't good enough when it comes to track laying. You got to have it perfect. Basics of wiring, common rail wiring, two rail wiring, now DCC. I think years ago when DCC came in, when I first saw it, I thought, oh, okay. And then when the first real system started coming out, I thought, regular power packs and cab control is over within 5 years. Well, it's been about 15. And I would say that most people have switched over to DCC. I know a few people who won't, but I think most people have done it. I won't go through all this, but this is basically how electrically it works. And common rail, which is probably the poorest way of running a railroad, two rail wiring, and then of course DCC. And this is conventional block control here is a picture of. But then you go to two cab with a reversing loop type of thing, and then you go to DCC. Now, one thing about DCC, a lot of people say, oh, it's expensive to get into. Actually, when you look at having to buy two power packs of reasonable performance, by the time you buy all the wiring, by the time you buy all the double pole, double throw switches, you can actually buy an NCE system, the power cab, or you can buy the Digitrax Zephyr for less than what it would cost you to wire it with a standard power pack. So that kind of example, to me, is a flawed example. So there's tons of introductory, DCC units if you're not into DCC as of yet. But and the NCE power cab to me is one of the best going. It just is very simple for new people and works well. For scenery, this is always the fun part, after you get it wired. Now, one of the things I always say to people who are building a layout, do not start scenery for 6 months after you get it wired. Wire your layout. Run it. Fool with it as much as you can. It's easier to make changes and fix wiring issues then than it is to do it after you've got all the scenery down. All right. So here's a shot of my old SN3 layout. This is kind of a throwback to the Malcolm Furlow San Juan Central piece. That's all hydrocal. That bridge is almost 40 inches in length, and that went down to, there was a river at the bottom. And I'll show you. So I like to use hydrocal because of its hardness and staining ability. I use cardboard strips and hot glue to build up the landforms. You can use industrial paper towels as the old paper mache technique. And I use a paint tray with the disposable inserts, and I put the pancake mixture of the hydrocal in there, and then I can swap the paper towel into that paint tray and draw it up and take a lot of it off, and then apply it to the basic cardboard form, and that really works well. And I have 2 or 3 paint trays, so when it dries, I take one out, put it aside, do the next one, and by the time I've got to the 3rd one, the first one is completely hard. You crinkle it up a little bit, it all falls off, you put it in the garbage, and you start again. So that scene is, well, that's what it started off as. I use spline road bed for almost all my layouts, except for in the yards. I will use a cabinet grade piece of plywood. I don't use MDF. I don't use basic plywood because I just find it's not stable enough. I like to use cabinet grade plywood. But this is all spline work, and this is where that scene of that bridge was. So I use just cardboard and cut it out, and once I get the rough form done, I just use a hot glue gun and some thin cardboard pieces and make it all up. And once you got that, then you can apply your hydrocal. Here's another piece of it, and those little cheap dollar clamps that you use can save a lot of sticky and hot burnt fingers from the glue gun. So here's the first one. It's first shot of it where I'm just applying the paper mache over it, and then I use rock molds. Bragdon rock molds are absolutely the best, and I do them in place. So I pour the hydrocal into the rock mold. As it dries, I will actually hold it onto the shell and let it dry in place. I don't put them on as hunks. And that's what it looked like when it was finished. A little different shot just because of the lighting, but here's a shot of a train going over it in SN3, and you can see the river below, and there is no magic to this. I took my camera and took a shot. There's no editing, no nothing to that, and that's how it turns out. Here's another scene that I started. Again, same thing. I got my trestle bridge in, I got the water tower and the little things, and I'm sort of ready for the scenery. And this is what it looked like when it turned out. It didn't turn out too bad. It wasn't quite finished, but in this picture, but you can see the river and that below. Again, I just use hydrocal with the rock molds and so forth. And down here below is the river. I use strictly the Woodland Scenes pigments, and they are a pigment. And one thing you have to do, you have to spray that with scenic cement later. There is no carrier or in the pigments. So what will happen is if you don't seal it with the scenic cement, it will basically fade away. The color will fade. If you apply water to it, it'll start to move around. So once you're satisfied with the color and let it dry for maybe a day or so, you spray it with the scenic cement, and that will lock in the color, and you have to do that. So here's that gorge where the bridge goes across. I mix up the scenic pigments in these little cups, and I just apply it with a sponge brush. And this piece up here that you can see, that's a separate piece, and I use that to make sure that when I'm mixing up another batch of pigment color, that I have it to the right consistency so it matches the rest of the rock. So I always have a spare 2 or 3 of these test pieces around to do that. And I always wait at least a week so that the castings are all dried out, because if you don't, you will get a different coloring. Whoops. Which way am I going? Yeah, so again, just use the burnt. I use very few colors, really. The raw umber and the stone gray are my 2 basics. And this one's kind of washed out, but here it is with the bridge back in, and the river has just been painted in the bottom. And then I take a spray gun and spray some green and then black in the middle. And you can see it here, and I add in all the details such as the fallen rock and so forth around it, and add some vegetation, and then I pour. I was using Envirotex here. Poured the Envirotex in, and it gives you a nice riverbed. Mono air equipment, I'm not going to get into that too much. Structures, I love structures. That's one of my big things. So you've got plastic kits, you got laser kits, bar mills, for example. There's a new company called Mind Mountain Models. They're making fantastic kits. You got board on board, you got plaster kits, which I do like, the Downtown Deco ones. You got resin kits. They're not a plastic. DPM is not a plastic. It's a resin. You got kit bashing and, of course, scratch building. And you can buy your Mount Albert scale lumber. Here's a really good tip. If you're doing DPM buildings, go get yourself some Faller Expert or Faller Super. This glue is absolutely the best for putting together DPM buildings. And how do I know this? Well, the guy who designed and worked at Woodland Scenics, Miles Hale, some of you may have known his name, is a good friend of mine, and he says that is the stuff to use, and it does work fantastic. It really does. We do a whole Modeling with the Masters clinic where we put these together with people, and we always bring about 10 bottles of this stuff, and it is the glue to use. This is the plaster kit that I did some time ago. Now this is corrugated metal, and I soak that in a little bit of acid to get the rust and so forth. Here's an old kit now. That's a laser kit, and it is really a neat kit. I've got now a little story on this one. You have to keep track of these. When this first came out, I couldn't afford it. I just didn't have the money. And later on in life, I saw it at a flea market, and I bought it. And I put it away, and I said, I'm going to build that one day. About, I don't know, a year later, I saw it in another place, and I went, oh, look, I should buy that building. And I bought it because I forgot I already had it. And then I put it in the box, and I go, oh, for crying out loud, I already bought that one. And about 2 years later, I saw they had 2 versions of this. They had the one with a lighting kit and the whole thing, and I went, oh, okay, I'll buy the third one. So I got lots of parts if I make a mistake. The nice thing about the laser, of course, the laser puts in all the details and stuff, such as the nail holes and stuff. You just have to do it. On plastic models, simply painting your plastic models with some earth tones or flat finish will give you a much professional look. I hate going to layout tours and I see the same Atlas building on everybody's layout and it looks identical. Come on, guys, paint them. Types of building, generally it's the same building as a real building process, the board-on-board process. Here was a little kit that we did. This is all board-on-board. This is a little kit, and a fella sent it to me as a picture on his layout that we had done in Mowing with the Masters as well. I think that's about it. Yeah. We get into all kinds of other stuff that I've got, but yeah. So that's the clinic. If you have any questions, I'm happy to do that. And let's see if I can get to the unshare. There we go.
Clark?
Yes.
Clark, I went to one of your Modeling the Master presentations up when you were up on in Grand Island at the Nike base.
Yeah.
And learned a lot. I still have the little kit that we put together.
Oh, yeah.
That seemed like it was about 100 years ago.
Yes, it does now. It was funny. I was in Milwaukee at Train Fest, and this fellow who had come and taken 4 or 5 of the Mowing with the Masters in Chattanooga and stuff. He was an older gentleman, and he knew I was coming to Train Fest, and I looked him up, and he said, "Come on over, Clark." And I said, "Well, I got 10 guys that I'm with." He says, "Bring them all over and see the layout." So we went over, and he had about 6 of the Mowing with the Masters little buildings or whatever we did on the layout, and he kept saying, "I built this with Clark. I built this with Clark." So that was really a nice moment. But Gary, thank you. Yeah, we really have a lot of fun doing the Mowing with the Masters. We put through almost 3,000 people now through that whole program, and it's been really terrific.
The best part of it's the little tools and the little tricks that you teach us as you're going along.
Well, thank you. If Andy wants to invite me back, he may not. I'm going to do a little tips and tricks clinic. I have one that I've already done, and I've got the pictures for it, but I'll do another one. And I was just thinking before we came on about doing one about cutting real glass and about maybe a little thing on the Arduino and a little bit of just a real quick, 2 or 3 minutes on each subject, and we can go through it. So I see there's some questions now. Is it ON30 or ON2.5? Well, it's actually ON30, which is HO track. Yeah, you could call it 2.5, I guess. And in your newer layouts, have you experimented with rigid building foam for scenery or roadbed? Yes. I have. Matter of fact, the ON30 display layout is all foam. I don't particularly like foam for a home layout, and I'll tell you why. A square foot of foam, if heated or ignited, will kill your whole family in your house. The cyanide gas produced off of it is just unbelievable. Now, people say, well, there's all kinds of stuff in your home that will burn, that will kill you, which is correct. But there is a building code, and that's why you got your insulation is in the wall has got a half inch of drywall on it, and that is supposed to allow you enough time to escape your home if there's a fire. So it's the same thing with a layout. You cover it with plaster. But I don't particularly like foam in that sense. I use it for some stuff. But I find cardboard strips and hydrocal and the old paper mache, I can build much faster and much neater than I can with styrofoam. Any other questions?
John's got a comment about.
Oh, the hardening in the long spot with the expert glue. Well, two things about that. You take a small diameter brass wire and you put it in there with a little hook on it, and it won't harden in the spout. The other thing about the spout, what happens is that when you touch it to the styrene or to the plastic, a little bit of that plastic starts to melt. And then when you undo the bottle, that little bit of plastic is sucked into that tip. And that's what hardens. It's not actually the solvent. It's actually the plastic that hardens. So by putting in that little piece of brass tubing or rod, you won't have that problem. And if it really gets hard, you have to be careful, but just heat it up with a lighter and it will clear it.
A lot of those also come with a little tool that you can use to clean them out.
Yeah, some have that tool, Gary. That's correct.
Yeah, I keep one around so I have a whole bunch of different ones.
Yeah. But that glue, man, and you can't buy it here in Canada. It's just been a real problem because of the border issues. Well, even before the COVID, but they didn't. It was hard to get across the border. So whenever I go to the States, I buy 3 or 4 bottles, and I usually give 2 or 3 away to friends. But I probably have on hand at least 4 bottles of the Expert and 4 bottles of the Super. And the difference between the Super and the Expert is the Super just works a little faster. That's all.
Clark got a question for you. This is Frank.
Go ahead, caller. First-time caller, long-time listener.
Okay. What was the name of that other modeling company? You mentioned Bar Mills, and there was another name on your
Mine
slide.
Mountain.
Mine Mountain?
Yeah.
Okay.
His name is Ron Kleiss. He's a young guy out of, I want to say New Jersey, but it could be eastern Pennsylvania. I forget where he lives.
Okay.
But he is a great guy, and he's come out with some really, really nice kits just recently.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Fast tracks? Let's see, what else? Anything else? Yes,
Give
Doug.
a plug for the fast tracks. What did they call their sander?
Oh,
that thing
yeah.
is awesome. I wrestled with spending that kind of money for a sanding disc, and I had built a custom. I had a friend of mine turn in an aluminum disc for a little AC motor I had, and made a stand for it and everything, and it took the 5-inch sanding disc. And I thought, I've got this thing. Why am I spending this much money for that sanding gadget? And I'll tell you what, I love it.
I know.
That is.
Oh, do I hear you? I'm just trying to see if I can find it.
But you have to really buy it with the extension.
Yeah,
extension and the precision measurement equipment to make it work well.
That duplicator is fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got a picture of it there for the guys that haven't seen it, or?
Yeah, I'm just trying to find.
By the way, I like your rock work on your SN3 layout, and it reminded me of a clinic. Excuse me, I went to quite a while ago. It's called something about rock work with modeling with the rock doctors.
Oh, yes.
Phil and Mary Miller.
Yes.
And they did the clinic in hospital scrubs.
Yes.
I think they had one of their other friends from the Maple Leaf contingent, I think, was working with them when they did that. But
yeah. Unfortunately, you know, Bill Miller's passed away now.
Yeah, I guess I knew
And,
that, and I haven't seen or heard anything about Mary since then. But
I'm just trying to find this alternate sander. All right, here, I'll put this in the chat, and there's a little video that you can watch, and it is fantastic. Yeah. So, yeah, the Rock Doctors. You know, actually, if you go way back, you know who else did that? Bill Storrs, and I forget who his compadre was there in the ID. They did a similar thing, and I remember that from years ago because Bill Storrs, if I remember correctly, was a art teacher in Lockport, I think.
Yeah, his good friend was probably Bob Fogel.
Bob Fogel, that's who it was. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
That goes way back, yeah.
Yeah, it does. Well, you know, all the guys that I know, well, Skip Helfrich, I don't know what's happened to him. Tom Tarpey, I know, is still around. I don't know if he's into modeling. Pete Moffat, who was part of the ID and did a lot of work for the ID. He's had some real health problems. Of course, Bob Willer, who had a fantastic New York Central layout on Grand Island, has passed away. Yeah. So we've lost some really good people in the Buffalo area. Yeah. So, any other questions, comments?
No,
yes,
but
I've got a question. How did you end up where you ended up so far north in Ontario?
Well, when after a lot of you know I was a paramedic in the Toronto area for like 35 years, and I've always liked the wilderness per se compared to the concrete, and I've always been into fishing, not hunting, but fishing and so forth, and also the expense when I started looking around for retirement places, it was pretty expensive. And when I found Elliott Lake, actually the guys in Sudbury, Ontario, which is a hotbed of model railroading, actually, there was a bunch of guys in Sudbury who wanted desperately for me to move to Sudbury, but Sudbury is not really my type of town. It's a lot bigger than Elliott Lake. Elliott Lake has only got 10,000 people in it. It's very small. You know it's small when there's only one McDonald's and one Tim Hortons. But we happened to stumble onto Elliott Lake. The prices of housing here was unbelievably reasonable. And from my home to the first lake, which has got nobody on it, and fantastic fishing, is 8 minutes. So I hook up my bass boat, and I'm on that lake in about 10-15 minutes, and I can catch two guys for a couple of hours. We'll catch 40 fish, no problem. So that to me was a big draw. The other big draw was there was a model railroad club in town, and they had a nice little room. They had a layout that was, well, brutal, to be honest, but a bunch of nice guys, but they just didn't have any experience. They were pretty isolated up here. And then when I joined, we tore down the old layout. We actually got DCC. Everybody switched over to DCC in their home layouts, and we built a fairly large layout. Unfortunately, we had a roof collapse in part of the building. This building is quite old, and they decided to tear down the whole building, so we lost our club location. But we still meet sort of in guys' basements and stuff, and I have a large layout that's in a room 27 by 13, and I've built a fairly large layout in HO, standard HO, which really surprises a lot of people. And we have operating sessions, and I use the JMRI operations unit on that, and I punch out switch lists and give it to the guys, and they're out switching trains. So it's worked out really good as far as that goes. But we are isolated up here. There's no question about it. There is no Costco. There is no big box stores. The closest box store is 2.5 hours away. And so model train stuff is, strictly via the internet, unless I drive the 6 hours to down south to a big store in the Toronto area.
Hey, Andy, I see a future clinic in Clark showing his layout.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I would. You were talking about. I'm just trying to see. Here, I got a picture. I'm just in the process of putting up. Let's see here. I'm gonna share, if you don't mind, Andy, for a minute.
Go ahead.
I think this is it. So that is a section on the new layout. Everybody see that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are two BMLA brass bridges, and this is sort of a new stretch where I'm just starting the rock work. This was all brand new. Underneath those two bridges will be the Lake Huron, the edge of Lake Huron.
Nice.
So, but the big trick with rocks, in my opinion, is to use hydrocal and I use the Bragdon rock molds and stuff. So I'm just kind of flipping. Some of these are in focus. There's a car that I weathered a long time ago that I really enjoy weathering. So, and I'm using static grass on the layout. So I'm just kind of it's kind of just pictures, and I stuck a tree in there just to see what it looked like. But that's all. Now, this out here, you can see the doorway, and I've got a hinged gate, and then you can see there's two tunnels. Now, that first tunnel by the light switch actually goes through the wall, and I have a switching layout or switching area on the outside there, and I'll see if I can find a picture. I know you guys don't want to go too late, but we'll see what I can find here. Yeah, so you come through here. Here's the other tunnel porter on the other side. And then I have a switching area here in the hallway. So.
Nice.
And well, this is all just kind of shots that I'm sort of. This is all done now. This was a long time ago, actually. Well, probably December when I took these shots. So, but okay.
Clark, thank you very much for doing this for us. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. I'm happy to do it.
And I think Frank's right. We're going to come back. Oh, yeah, show that picture.
Yeah, see, that's why I moved up here.
That looks like it's full scale.
Yeah, that is full scale. What else? Oh, well. But, yeah, it's a fantastic place, and it's, just to give you an idea, this is another shot on the railroad. And when you know a guy who has a laser, it's very handy because one of the times when I was down in Southern Ontario, I went over to Tim's at Fast Tracks, and I spent some time on his laser, and you can see these panels. They're all made out of black walnut, and these are actually NCE plugs, but what I did, instead of having the plastic pieces, I cut them on a laser and engraved the CN logo and my division, and those are all around the layout now in nice black walnut. And then this is underneath this top part is a whole hidden layout, or a hidden yard, and that's what these switches are. And they have LEDs to tell me when I'm in the zone, so when I can park the train. And I don't know if any of you are using touch toggles, but that's what these buttons are. When they light up, they're either red or green, and all you have to do is put your finger in, just touch them, and they'll turn the turn the tortoise machines. So anyway, I digress. And this is a little picture of winter.
Yeah.
You think, before in the Toronto area, I used to phone up guys like Bob Willer and stuff, and I used to kid them and go, hey, why don't you guys come north and get out of the snow? Well, not so much anymore.
Not anymore.
Anyway. Let's see.
Clark, thank you very much for doing this, and Frank's right. We'll probably come back at you. You already said you would do a different clinic, and as Frank said, we'll probably want to see more of the layout. So.
Oh yeah, well, as you and I talked, over the summer, because I'm fishing and doing other stuff, I really try not to model too much in the summer unless it's really a hot, ugly day or something, and I'm not out fishing. Then I'll model, but I really need that time away because I'm so involved with the hobby and the club here in town that I get burned out. And so the summer is I kind of just step away from the layout, and I spent almost all week just cleaning the layout room, because I think every time I got something, I go, I just throw it in the layout room, and I couldn't even hardly walk in there. So now I spent a lot of time cleaning it up, and this week I'm going to get back to some scenery and some actual work on the layout. But one of the big problems is that these Arduinos and everything else, when you see something shiny, and I'm bad for this. Oh, look at that, and you want to start working on something else. So you have to be a little bit disciplined, and I don't have any discipline.
Got it. I got it. Well, I see Doug had to run, so Doug, thank you very much for doing the clinic for us.
Good to see you, Doug.
Appreciate it. Thank you. And Clark, again, thank you for doing your clinic, and we hope to see you again.